Good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome to another edition of Let's Build Community Content with Rob Jones. How you doing, man?
It's Friday. I am well. I'm healthy. I am already somehow looking forward to Thanksgiving dinner and almost completely unaware that it's November. The other day, I was asked about the month. They're like, "Yeah, we'll just do that, whatever." And I started to write October, and was like, "Bro, it's the 13th today of November," which is
It
scary.
is
I don't know
middle
what's
of
happened.
November. Yeah, it's some stuff has happened, especially this week, but this year has been interesting and we were talking about, before we jumped on, the ability, like one of the best ways to learn uh, HubSpot right now and overcome a lot of the challenges that we see with onboarding, adoption, uh, which tools do what, what's new, keeping up, is this community-based like learning environment, like understanding how other people are using HubSpot, um, how other people are not using HubSpot. Uh, so as we think about like um, the topic today, and it doesn't even have to be, it's not even going to be about HubSpot specifically necessarily, but just like leaning into what the community is wanting, like this whole idea of like going where they are to send the message versus trying to get them to wherever you want them to be, finding that balance, listening to them, uh, kind of serving what they're asking for specifically sometimes, but also serving into the gap, right, of what they're not asking for and maybe they're missing. You said you've been working on a project that kind of rolls all that together. How do we let people know that we hear them and that we're here to support them? I think is a good way to think about it sometimes. So, what's on your mind today as you uh, work on your messaging and the stuff you're responsible for?
Well, messaging to whom, I think, is the key part. So there's internal messaging, there's external messaging, there's perspective, there's a narrative, there's a ton. I've learned a lot. Demand is hard, so is marketing, especially with brand. But um, I feel like people that we've done this, a lot of people have done this, and a lot of the messaging and narrative in B2B just in general is kind of, I would say, like conceptual or abstract. So when you're offering somebody, not even that as much as non-standardized, even talking about guided onboardings, right? Like we have a product called guided onboarding already that's not the same as that. um, the word partners to us means really like five different things all at the
Hmm.
same time. So whenever you start talking about go to market or rev ops, or really that is like the high level, it's like what, how do people experience or interpret that? And so if I say we offer an onboarding, and that's what we call it, the stigma or perception or connotation associated with that for us is like, oh, well, this is our onboarding product. For the customer base or the audience, maybe onboarding signifies something to them that it doesn't necessarily mean to us. Same with, you know, manage RevOps or RevOps service provider or RevOps as a service or fractional RevOps support, any of that, right? There's a litany of things that you could call it. But how do you term things, or which terminology do you use that makes the most sense, not to the company but to the customer? And so that the exercise is in trying to figure that out, right? Like if I say trial to you, that could indicate a bunch of things, like there are PLG we know this because we're in it. But free trial could mean to a customer base in a certain segment, that's not worth it, they're going to steal your info. It just really depends on who you're talking to. So
Yeah.
a perspective on top of that with a narrative is something that you put forward as the lens through which that terminology is formed. So if we're, and we this, just for rev partners, the beginning kind of narrative and perspective and theme, really. I guess theme is part of the word here, but like we offer a consultative full go-to-market analysis up front in engagements. It's like a revenue engine. It was very car centric. It was very revenue engine. I'm sure you've heard that a bunch, but it's like,
Hmm.
let's take a look under the hood. That specific POV and messaging and theme. That's a useful metaphor, right? Uh, or analogy to make more sense of like why we're doing it this way, what you should expect. Um, it would be a lot more familiar and useful to somebody that was car native, right? Or that
Yep.
dealt a lot with
Yep.
cars. Um, but it's not like we don't. It's not like we're NASCAR or like F1 or we don't do that. So that's what. How do you explain something that is non-standardized, difficult for people to kind of understand what all the breadth and depth and complexity of the offering is? How do you make that immediately apparent to them? So much so that it creates demand. It's hard. I mean, your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. Like, I love the topic of creating demand. I never thought it could be so divisive, depending on who you're listening to. And I think that's where it's like getting clear on, like, usually you're creating demand, like for a product or for a service or for a thing. Like most of the pain that leads to demand, you're not creating that. That's happening like without you. Sometimes you can help people define what that pain means, right? But the demand is there. That's why they're even looking into stuff in the first place. Um, with complex offerings, man, maybe this relates, maybe it doesn't, but this has been my experience this week. And since inbound, really, like in something I'm trying to figure out how to bridge this gap. Because like we've talked about all the time, like how do you be known? How do you get that done?
Yep.
Right. And what I'm finding outside of the super user base, right? Like it's very B2C. Like it doesn't matter that they're working for a business. It's very B2C in that if you're not out there in front of them just all the time, right? Like it doesn't matter what kind of targeting, it doesn't matter ICP language you're using. You're just not there enough for them to even have a chance at noticing you. And what I've learned since inbound is people will say, "Oh, I see you all over LinkedIn."
Yep.
And I'm like, "Okay, I'm doing something right." Right. But then we talk and they have no idea what I do. Like they haven't ever clicked on anything. They don't know what I usually talk about. Right. So clearly, like that's one piece. Okay, you've seen my face, but now you don't, if you don't know anything about me, like is that am I just noise then at that point? Or like there's some level of positive generally when they mention that. So I think that's a good thing. But like if I if instead of focusing on the daily, right, and I focused on some really complex content and this is what a RevOps roadmap looks like, and you know, I probably don't get those responses of I see you all over the place, but it doesn't mean that people are even going to notice to even dig into the complex content. So finding analogies and finding, these top level things to use to give hints, right? And I think you mentioned like how do you get them to understand right away or as quickly as possible, like in order to engage further, right? The more complex the thing is, it's a challenge for sure.
So the familiarity thing, if if that's the case and you are aware and people are having that reaction, like they know you but they're not sure of what you do or they're not sure of a problem you could solve, what sort of impact on any volume metrics would you say that would have? Like if you're looking across the bow tie funnel, what does that look like for somebody that is more familiar or has reach but like their offering is not understood clearly.
Well, your audience might be pretty big, but
Right. So you might
they're
like
not moving. They're not moving anywhere.
they would be stuck in like V0, like you would have good traffic or you would have good like vanity metrics or impressions, but there isn't conversion into like booked meetings. So there's
Right.
top of funnel, either like strong, robust numbers, anything you could correlate there, maybe even MQLs, but like they're not converting into like stage 1 or 2 deals. That's what people are seeing. That's influencer marketing and all of that, where people are just familiar because they're like always in the space or consistent. That's great for those top of funnel metrics, as long as you can then tie an offering or like highlight a pain point or a reason for people to continue building familiarity, trust, and whatever. Or you could also be like, we've seen this where we another thing you might expect from this in this space is like uh maybe not commissions, but like referring out and referrals in or more, and the close rates there are higher because people that do know and are familiar, and you're influencing or impacting with your like reach or brand, whatever that looks like, right? Those are metrics you might see weirdly inflated without much tactic or strategy behind them necessarily. So it's like the people that know of the people of your audience, of the people that know you, there are some that know and trust and know so well, and you're also top of mind that you become a trusted referral source. So you see stuff like that happen, not like against strategy, but without, that might seem initially like an outlier, but that's like the effect of some of the top of funnel stuff that you can have. So yeah, how do you create more demand, or how do you create more clarity once people know, like, have familiarity in what it is they could pay you to do for them, I guess, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's where, like, for your analogy example, like, how far do you go until they think like you do stuff with cars,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, Rev Partners. Okay. So Rev is engines and like everything I'm seeing, they're relating to cars. Okay, like I got a problem with my car. I think I'm buying a car, so let me reach out to these guys,
Yeah.
right? And as we've been talking about it, it comes to mind all these commercial teardowns you've seen where it's like you just get so engaged in the commercial and it just builds the emotions and that's the end. It's like, hey, buy our toilet paper. It's like, what? Like, okay, did not see that coming, right?
Yep.
So how do you get that engagement to something that's familiar when you don't have time to explain, what it is you do, or if you do explain what you do, that's not going to engage like anybody. It's interesting, and I can see why it's an interesting challenge for you right now as you think about it. So what have you been like? What have you just share whatever you can, but like where are you going with that? Like,
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I'm not really sure. I think I know. To me, it makes sense, but it's interesting, like how it'll be received. Exactly for what you just said. There's a threshold that you cross to where the perspective and the similarities are too extreme, right? Like Rev Partners, and we have a product that is kind of a hybrid between a retainer service and an onboarding called a fast track, right? It's like not 60 to 90 days. Um, it's kind of hub specific. A lot. It's super useful. I mean, this is an offering we're seeing more like SMB mid market. Anyway, like think about that. Right? I did like a Ricky Bobby like promo series for this and some other stuff that was so now you saying like Rev Partners is the car probably didn't help my case out a lot. Dressed in anyway.
well, I think that's where like to your point there, that's where so what helping me just think about this out loud, like that stuff works when it's like, okay, I'm engaged now, and then right after that, they see another piece of content that is like can connect the dots to like, okay, he's not talking about NASCAR, he's talking about like,
Yeah.
revenue engines,
That's a
right,
lower
for
percentage
companies.
play though. Like of the people that see it and that are interested and that it makes sense. Yeah, the Ricky Bobby and that's familiar. It's I feel like that gets attention or whatever. But the conversion rate from like people that see that to actually have being in market and feeling like they're qualifying themselves, whatever that looks like, it's not the best percentage play. The best percentage play to me is to explain something in a way that feels already understood. So there's a lot of this is like how you start I would say like how you start a company or how you start like an entity as a perspective. So all the stuff that's happening, right? All the buzzwords, all the whatever. There's a lot of insights or deductions that you would take in. Uh, the Amazon effect means that B2B buying is more B2C than ever, which means that buyers are now further along in the journey before they reach out to sales. They have like I would say sometimes unrealistic expectations for pricing, delivery, and all that. And it's that concept is just like Amazon. I need a slip cover or a new green screen. Phone, order, it's outside my house, right? That does not work for HubSpot implementation or like that is not how it works. So, how do you communicate that and kind of hedge against the misunderstanding, right? I don't think it's a car analogy necessarily, but for all of that, that is like sure you can onboard HubSpot and then figure out some tactics, but what is that actually doing for your business? That's strategy. That you need somebody to come in and help inform that and take a look at data. Also, like another thing we contend, and this is a fact, your CRM is a product, not a project. So an onboarding is a project. Not gonna, yeah, it'll be fine for the first 90, but if you don't know how to use it, if it's not being adopted, if you have the wrong strategy in place, all that, all of those things feed into me to a place of like this realization that the spe- specifically in B2B, and I would say even more so in services, the buyer seller relationship has changed to doctor patient, like is moving that way. You need somebody that has specialists in network for deeper problems. You need somebody that's a diagnostician. If your org is like an entity, which it is, like your business is a growing, living, breathing entity, which it is, you need somebody that has context for a long period of time to be able to understand root issues and behavior patterns that are leading to these pains that you have. That's a doctor. You need somebody in that the relationship has to understand that like results and impact will not be immediate unless there is a surgery. Like it that almost is now making it seem like we're a healthcare provider or whatnot. It's not that. It's that the approach and your point of view should be easily understood, which I feel like healthcare is probably at least that relationship is more easily understood. It's a narrative that people can relate to. Like your org health is important and it's based on revenue and growth. You need somebody that takes all that into concern um, and has context and nuance to be able to help you improve. Is this coming from applied to HubSpot or applied to like a B2B org? We didn't hit these targets for Q3 revenue numbers. We're not sure why. Like we don't know why that is, right? Let's dive into the metrics. Let's dive into this. What you thought was a marketing issue is actually a branding positioning issue. What you thought, all of that stuff. It takes a deeper level of understanding. And there's all sorts of things that you can do. Number one, to help prevent pain, like by having checkups, quarterly QBRs, like that kind of stuff that is very strategic first and foremost. And so then the tactics are derided from that. That's what we do. Like
Yeah.
that is our value. So whenever you look at something like that, um, from a perspective of, well, we just need to set it up. It becomes difficult when the perspective and like how you choose to engage in your MO doesn't lend itself to like product continuity, maybe. So if that is true and that is the approach, how would we ever offer just like a rote, quick, week-long onboarding? Because it wouldn't be true to our perspective of the problem and our approach.
Right.
So
I think
that
like, yeah, what I'm hearing, like you're empowering me to to be more confident in some of the things that I've been saying, and I know others have said as well. Like we like to get the initial interest and the whole flow of leads right now into HubSpot, and I've talked to some salespeople about this. Like when most of their lead gen is people wanting lead gen, like in the easy buttons that they think that HubSpot could be, you have to start the conversation a certain way to not lose them right away, but you have to find a way, which we're not finding right now, to transition to platform. And when we are all working in a world that is built off of point solutions and quick win onboarding, right? Or like where we just got to move through this checklist and then onboarding check, right? That is causing so many problems right now. And as long as that infrastructure exists, like we're going to have those problems. So how many people can we get on the bandwagon of no, this is how you buy a customer platform, this is how you be successful with a customer platform. It is through these, very not easy button approaches. Like the easy but what we need to make the easy button, and I think is this is to tie it back to like existing in communities and working with each other to create content, is this educational aspect of how does everybody view the quick wins problem, right? And how do we start like getting rid of that? Like, can we make a quick losses campaign? Like to be like, oh, you want some quick wins? Here's the quick losses you're gonna get. Like if that's the focus, right? But as you started describing, the doctor analogy, it's like, yeah, like I've seen a lot of companies do like, not a lot, but like revenue diagnostics, right? And
yep.
revenue checkups and things like that. So, uh, and we got a lot of people talking about organizational health right now.
Yep.
So is it too easy, Rob, for you? Like just to like go drive that way? Sorry to use a car analogy there to
I mean,
drive that way.
it's not easy at all because of what we were talking about with uh, how familiar actually is that. I would argue it's probably the most familiar like per capita analogy you can make. People understand pain is universally understood, and help and treatment is I would say universally understood. What is completely not universally understood is what to expect from a services engagement in a like that. Who knows, right? So there's a couple of ways you can combat that. One is making the messaging and the analogies metaphor like more clear and more easily understood, really more customer centric. If there's a lot of things that you can assume, um, which would be if they're having a problem dire enough or serious enough to reach out or to be exploring a solution, then like that's an indicator of distress. And so instead of trying to blindly offer something, what you're talking about with like quick wins versus like short wins is like drugs or pills versus rehab to me in the perspective. If you have a massive if you have a strategy issue in how your go to market is set up, then you could move from HubSpot to Salesforce and back and still erode your business because you're not understanding like what tactics are needed based on what strategy based on the data. Like you're just not. The parallel there is like if I go have gastric bypass surgery and lose 150 pounds immediately and then go back after the get out of the hospital to not working out, drinking a 2 liters of Coke every day and you know I'm going to have the same problems again. So with that, like with this wellness approach, there's behavior change. Your data is sickly. You're like you can't find what you need in the CRM. It's not structured well. That's a behavior. That's an input problem. We fix that. Like we address that proactively. Um, I mean that helps to inform the approach, and it helps to speak into like justification for some of the things and some of the approach itself. Um, and within that approach, within that perspective, there are 100% quick wins. Like think about how I don't know how much like consumer talk and whatever you look at, but all of that's like we're not gonna sell you like a miracle pill anymore, maybe. But a lot of that's like, hey, three things to do, just three easy things to do in the morning to like start your day better. 30, 30, 30. 30 grams of protein, 30 minutes after you wake up, 30 minutes of like mild exercise. It's a great way to get started. That's a quick win. Doing that is a quick win. But having the consistency and adopt do this and having that understanding allows for it to be daily habit, part of your doctrinology, and that allows for long-term change. So what we're up against, I think, in the HubSpot ecosystem is that it's a different doctrinology, but it's kind of the same thing, right? Like we've invested so much money into Salesforce at this point, like we're never leaving or the business will go. That's sunk cost. It's a bunch of other things. Like there is a systemic way to get to make it better. Or really the bigger one is, oh well, if you're above 50 million or if you're at enterprise level, Dynamics or Salesforce. That's it. It's the only two options you have. That's not true either. So how would you put forth a perspective through which your like core values, your mission, your offering is experienced better by people who may or may not even be your ICP yet? It's crazy. We have to know our buyers and our buyers' buyers. We have to solve for the people we're selling and the people they're selling. We have to solve for issues that we're incredibly acutely aware of that are larger and incredibly specific, minute, like those things as well. So within that, it requires a consultative. We talked 2 weeks ago about uniformity, right? And like, how without doing hardly anything, how do you build trust, build like credibility? The perspective and uniformity of messaging helps reinforce all that. So that, yeah, it's hard. I mean, the exercise is not meant to be, I don't think, done in a day or two, but I've been thinking about it for a minute. Hopefully I can. I mean, does that make sense to you? I guess like if we're putting this
Yeah.
out here now, world, how much does that make any sense, or what am I?
No, you're definitely helping me like think through some stuff about like, and not to always make it about me, but like, why is it that people are recognizing me in the first place, right? And like, and I guess like my messaging and why you do recognize me is that big beard, like people like that's a part of the messaging. Like when you see my face, I usually have a big smile on my face too, right? Um, Tying it to some of what I'm usually talking about on every episode I'm doing is this awareness problem, right? That is almost, you can tie almost every problem in the ecosystem right now to a lack of awareness in some regard. Um, Either it's what is possible with HubSpot, how to use pieces of HubSpot, um, uh, strategies related to that, what just came out that maybe solves the problem I've always had, or the thing that caused me to need a different system. Now we can do in HubSpot. So that's, as you were describing that, like the quick wins, since we know we need those to get some engagement, it's shifting them from tactical and execution to awareness, right? So
Yep.
before I got to awareness, I was like, okay, what would a quick win be? The quick win of showing the data in a visible way so that leadership, oh, oh, wow, I didn't know it was that bad, right? That's a
Yep.
quick win. Now, to do it in a way to position, this is where it's how are we selling the product into that expectation, right? The visibility, this whole unified view of the customer. Like if you can get prospects to that point where they agree that is the number one goal that they're going for, like it gets a lot easier to close the deal. But also, like, why do we need that unified view? Like helping people, understand that. And that's where, if that's the goal and we agree that's the goal, then the first step is like, where's the data? How are we getting it together to even create that unified view in the first place? Now we see it. So quick win number one, understanding what it's telling us. Like quick win number two. And now we can
What
actually,
are you defining like a quick win of what? What are you winning? Because it's not ROI. Like that's the other part we haven't even talked about is like return on investment, whether it's 4,000, 40,000, for whatever it is. People want to see some justification for the spend or I mean, for their time invested from an attention perspective, right? Ha, quick wins to me, even your example of like, here it is, here's the, I can show this is all, that's not even, it's a win, but it's like, it is instant buy-in. It's like depth of buy-in and trust so that something that might be challenging or might not be the easiest thing to hear or say or report on or give it or consult on is 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 an easier barrier to overcome, right?
right.
So the quick wins are more justified in terms of credibility, trust, buy-in, any of that. If you
Yeah.
Since we're doing this whole episode from like the medical lens, right? If you go to the doctor against your will, or like I don't know what's wrong, what do? They put the BP cuff on you. They make you take your weight. They do a couple things. They triage, and if they show you something that says, Mr. Carolyn, your BP is 200 over 140, what is that? What effect does that have on you? You're
You're
right.
like, oh,
I'm screwed. Okay, it makes sense that I'm here. Thank God I'm in a hospital, right? Like that is quick buy-in,
yeah.
right? Did you spend any money yet, or did they provide any? Did they heal you yet? Probably not. But it's buy-in of like, here's what we need to do to get you better, right? So if you're at 200 over 140, you're the the measures taken are different, and like you're having a stroke at that point. But
Yeah.
if it's like, oh, Mr. Carolyn, is your BP normally 160 over 90? Oh, that's a little high. Usually it's 135 over 85. Well, we're going to give you some beta blockers as a prescription, but like really that'll only manage it for now. We recommend that you know, t- cut salty foods and dairy. What? I'm not a doctor. Just
Right.
legal disclaimer. I don't. This is not real medical advice. It's making a point, hopefully. But that would be a quick recommendation. That almost all of that is something you're going to have to buy into
Yeah.
yourself. It if they say if your blood pressure is 120 over 80 and they start making recommendations, I'm
Right.
fine. I know that I'm. So you're not getting that quick buy-in. There might be another way to do it. There might be like it's 100, 120 over 80, but you somehow weigh 714 pounds. Although, okay, wow, I didn't know that was another thing contributing to this other problem that I have. So you're saying it's systemic, right? Right? Like then you get buy-in to be able to make the changes, corrections, updates, like the treatment plan for improvement. If you don't have that, people will say, because we see it all the time, like, yeah, you can make this update to our lead scoring mechanism. Yeah, you can do this to our sales stages, but don't touch anything over here, or you can't speak into this thing at all. Have you dealt with it? I think you're laughing because it's like,
We were just
oh,
talking about it on the previous show. Like,
yep,
like I had a thing earlier this year where it's like an opportunity that comes my way, and it's like and it's because of this. So much of what we talk about is about building trust into this gap like there is a serious lack of trust within the ecosystem right now with knowing who can actually help me, how much am I supposed to pay, like do I need all the hubs, do I not need, like, do I need an onboarding at all? Should I just focus on, right? It's very hard to find trusted resources for that right now, um, unless you are willing to engage on a some kind of time, effort, or money investment that you haven't had to do before, right? And so so on both sides, buyers and sellers in this case, we're like trying to try address that up front and make sure we don't put ourselves in that situation. So the email comes in and it's like, hey, this client needs some help. They don't want an audit. They just need somebody to build some workflows.
Yep.
And okay, so you want me to take like the one part of the system that relies the most on the context of the system as a whole and also carries the highest risk for the most amount of impact to doing it wrong.
Yep.
And you don't want me to know anything about your system. Like that's a no. Like if you can find, I know unfortunately you could probably go find somebody that will do that for you, but that's where it starts to tell you like right away, we're not like that relationship is not a great, it's not a great way to start because then they always hedge at the end. It's like, oh, maybe we'll be interested in some kind of retainer. It's like, not if we start that way, you won't be, because it's going to be very hard. Or I'm going to have to do a bunch of work that you're not allowing me to scope for free to actually do the valuable thing for you, right?
Yep. Yeah. The quick loss campaign. I like that a lot. But that is the adoption of a perspective into practice, right? If and I would agree, the most mission critical thing that requires context to be able to like mess with. No, I'm good. Like respectfully, that's not going to serve you or me well. That that means a couple of things. Like why do you think that interaction happened? Well, they themselves, to your larger point, are they have either some awareness, but they're not educated. Like they think the strategy is set, they think that's solid, and that the only tweaks need to happen on the back end. Maybe just verifying that on your end is like you're right, and I did look at this, and I will do this. Here's how much it is. That would have been to me and maybe an option, but it also speaks to you or whoever is influencing them didn't get through enough. So starting small, like there's this reciprocity of trust with like sometimes the quick wins, like I said, aren't financial. They're more needed to be able to get into those deeper, longer, whatever relationships that are, I would say, inherently more like lucrative for you and helpful to the client. And some of that too is like they don't want to believe the problem is as bad or as complicated maybe as it actually is. So they try to not put band-aids on it, but like worst case scenario is the thing they want to address last, right? Like maybe it's just this into this workflow. Maybe it's how we think about workflows. Maybe it's whatever. And then it's like actually the problem is so core to your business that there's really no like it's a lot worse than you thought. Enter the medical analogy, right? Like that's that's how that works most of the time. We're gonna go. I have no cartilage in my left knee at all. This is true. Whenever they were trying to figure out all of the knee issues I was having, they did laparoscopy. They went in and looked around. They did a couple other things. They fixed my meniscus, but eventually they were like, we need to do a different kind of scan. And they found that the bone density and cartilage, like in a knee imaging, I think they ended up doing an MRI because of a previous surgery that I'd had, cartilage entirely eroded, which was the worst. Like there's the only options there were like stem cell treatment that I'd have to fly out of country for, or a knee replacement at 27. That's the worst case. So there's stuff that you can do beforehand that it might be like AMA. I feel like we need one of those. Hey, this is against partner
Yeah,
advice, like against, you know, wouldn't do this, but so sign this waiver. Um, but the biggest
yeah,
risks, both to each party, are the things typically reserved for last. The buy-in that you'd have to have, even from a physician or a clinician or a surgeon or somebody that's treating you. for you to execute on that play has to be tremendous. I didn't have it. I told the I told the guy, I'll just wait until better medical technology is invented because I'm not having a knee replacement.
Yeah.
That we've been told that in engagements. Like, yep, this looks good. You're probably right, but I'm not interested. I'll see if I can do it some other way, right? Like the
Right. Well, that's
and
like, yeah, as you're describing that, it's like even that level of awareness, like getting there, like it helps both parties, right? Okay, now we're not going to try so hard to help you learn, um, because you've made a realization that for whatever reason you've decided you're not ready or you're not willing to commit to doing it well or doing it in a different way or the change management required, right? All these reasons. So if we can get to that level, again, for awareness purposes and how we sell into that expectation, it's like, yeah, the first wins are going to be like, if we don't do these things, like you're not going to be bought in, you're not going to be committed. So the first level is awareness of the data. What is it telling us? It doesn't mean we're going to go try and fix everything it might be telling us. We just need to be aware that, okay, this is a business problem, or it might be a business boon. And now we're just transitioning all our investment over this way because we didn't realize how profitable this this thing was. And now we have data to show it. That's where just setting up the expectations of like the last thing you should be doing when onboarding a new system is trying to execute massive campaigns as quickly as possible, right? Especially if
just to
we're
be devil's
eh,
advocate here and speak into something you've mentioned almost every time we've done this. What if what they heard right before that was the first thing that you should do when setting up campaigns is to whatever? That's prevalent. How many people have you dealt with that have an instant like distrust or anger or fear or apprehension or that have been burned by other people that say, actually, this is what you need to do, and it didn't turn out to be that way at all, or even in the context work that way? This is not to, I'm not mentioning any names, and I think generally the intent is for people to help, but it's like to the whole point of the entire HubSpot ecosystem and B2B and tech and SaaS and software in general, so much stuff is happening and changing and updating constantly that even somebody that entered into an engagement or arrangement or, hey, we have this issue. Okay, I can do this thing. I recommend we do it. We do it. It doesn't work. By the time, can you imagine like by the time you've done something, a feature is now available that fixes it for less, or that the industry thought has changed. How many, how many years did you hear or see like no kale, no sale, right? Like kale is a health food, kale is a superfood, kale will do whatever. And then some years later, kale is found out to have like not, it's not very good for you. It actually has a bunch of bad stuff in it, right? That is real. And so when people are like, oh, just, just get a marketing agency or just get a whatever, and they start thinking, like the last three times, like so
yeah,
that's also prevalent within not only the ecosystem but in that sales, you know, approach just in general is
for
that
sure.
that's why that to me that's why the approach has to be consumer centric from like an empathy standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. And
So it's
most of
still
that
about
empathy,
trust. You
right?
continue to be right. It's still about accruing trust and favor before ROI is even allowed to be a consideration. Like people, if you're doing your job and there's ROI in terms of trust, or even let's say somebody's watching you and watching these shows that you're doing, and you've never heard of them, they don't ever engage or pop into chat or whatever, and they're like, they see this one nugget, they implement it, whatever. That's value, and it's probably helped them with you having no way to track it or even have awareness of it. So that when somebody randomly is like, Chris, been a fan or thought you might be able to help out in this space. I know you're in kind of the industrial science. We have this thing. That's what you're always talking about. But there's there's intangible trust and thus like ROI from an education or inspiration standpoint almost before you're You're getting there now. If buyers are 70% through the journey or whatever it is before they engage now, that also means there's a lot of stuff they're doing and having awareness of to fix or treat their own problem. And that could involve some of your input just without you knowing it.
Yeah. Oh, that's like when you ask like what do you do when somebody said the opposite thing like right before, it's either in that moment you have to unpack that baggage, right, that they have,
Yeah.
which you got to do no matter what. Like if that's said, like it's stopping in your tracks, and if you don't deal with that dissonance, like no matter how great your thing is, like there's that uncertainty gap that will persist.
All right, let's
It
try
gets a
this.
lot.
Because I mean, so you we're dealing with it right now. I'm telling you, Chris, you need to do this thing. You need to have better branding on your Riverside. It's going to make you more money for whatever, let's just role play this out. And you say, "Huh, well, that's not what I was told," right? Or like I haven't heard that. And I say, "Whoever told you otherwise is an idiot." And you say, "My best friend," or like, there's context needed even in that. If you do address
Right.
it quickly, how do you address it? Do you say, "Oh, that's 100% wrong," kind of a risky play, depending, or you say, "Oh, that's a good thought. Yeah, that sometimes works. Why didn't it work for me?" Like addressing that initial friction and obstacle, it's an art. It's hard as hell to
Yeah.
do that right without a lot of context because it's a transference of disappointment and pain from whatever didn't work onto the new interaction at the time. I
Yeah.
would be shocked to know if most of the people that have that, because I've never experienced anyone that's like, "Yay, you get to do this again," right? There's always some like hesitance or reluctance or you know ill will, whatever that is, for solutions that did not work previously. So then
Yeah.
it's an exploration of, "Oh, you said you implemented lead scoring. Can I take a look at that? Like how?" And you find out it wasn't done at all. So even
Right.
what they're saying, you're gonna, "Oh, we already addressed that." Did you? You said you switched to, um, you changed your diet up recently, right? And it's working. Yeah, I did. All buttermilk, 4 gallons a day, and then I eat some Funyuns. Oh yeah, no, that is a change. That's not gonna help. Like that,
Right.
the context is king beyond anything.
Yeah.
So the more context you can have specifically for that made up, situation, the better in addressing it with a good outcome.
Right. And like, so it sounds like, and I haven't thought about it this way, but as talk about AI more and more, and like it's hard to avoid context being an answer right now to most problems. Like, so that makes the process that we go through for buyers and sell like it's the art is building context like continually. And if that exchange happens, and this is like my younger days inside of an organization, I would just try to overpower. It's like, no, this is why I'm right, right? Instead of like, oh, what did you? So that exchange we just had, where I said something different than you had just heard, like, what do you think? Like, why do you think that is? Or why do you know why that other person said it? Right? Like starting to understand how they even think about that disconnect.
Yep.
Um, and starting to hand it'll tell you how they think about things in general, and then it starts to guide you on how to unpack. That's why I say unpack it, right? They just dropped like a whole set of luggage like on your doorstep. And if you try to just like say, come on in the house, we'll leave the luggage over there, like it's not going to work. Uh, and that's a lot of what the way I was saying it, because I don't know if I just like challenging, statements or whatever. When I was on the inside of manufacturing, I did not understand because I was the marketer, like with the buy-in to do digital transformation, to focus on customer experience, um, to be the best resource, to turn the company into the best resource in the space, right? So of course I'm aligned with all these consultants on the outside, much of whom are in the HubSpot ecosystem. And I'm like, why is this not getting through? Like, makes so much sense. They're saying it in a way that I think makes sense, right? But what I was also seeing is the actual execution that happens is we got to start with the quick wins first. And the quick wins to get the buy-in that you think you're getting are the Google ads. And we got to prove it. We got to prove it over and over. But we're proving these little things, these quick wins that turns it into, okay, just give me more of that. We're not even going to go to the bigger strategy, right? That's enough for me. And those are like kid gloves, like, oh, you can't understand the bigger picture. You can't understand complex systems, even though your factory floor is built on lean and you're so proud of that. And you can't stop talking about how you did that. You put that on your back. And when you look at the documentation, it's like, you think some of our customer, like, data modeling documentation is complex. Like, man, go look at some engineering diagrams, right?
Yeah.
And that's where when I come out and I come into this ecosystem, I look at everybody that says they serve manufacturing and I see all of the case studies related to lead gen. That's the kid gloves, like, oh, we can help you with lead gen. We can start there. It's like, no, none of you actually need that, right? But since they've all been doing that, that's the baggage that, okay, I know I need help. I'm going to go get a marketing agency. I'm going to go get an SEO agency. These people said they could help me. It didn't work out. Almost every single one of them has a story like that. Uh, and there's other ways to kind of avoid having to get the baggage on your doorstep, right? One of those was like, I'm not calling us a marketing agency. I'm not doing that. I'm not having that conversation, right? But then what do you call yourself? What words are you using to connect the dots?
I know which words you're using a lot of: baggage, context, unpacking, uh, discussion. Does that sound like a sales process, or does that sound like therapy? Does it sound like buyer seller, or does it sound like consultant patient? Like, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Right.
And so, what is a easier way to frame that? Discovery call or consult? Like that. Whichever example is like you're saying it now, and it's been this way for a while, but I think it's worse, or the problem, education, awareness, terminology, linguistics, into all that is like more severe now, just because there's so much more people have access to instantly. So knowing what to call it, using to me, don't sound like a buyer seller relationship or any of that. It sounds like the way to figure out what is actually needed is very much consultative.
Yeah. It's a way to work together to solve a problem, right? This whole concept of like you're on the same team. And I think that's what you're getting at when we started. It's like the buyer seller relationship has changed. And if you can't immediately get on the same, like we're both in this together to solve this problem that you're describing, like, and you can only get there through through understanding the context. And again, that brings us back to like if you're a part of the community and you understand how people are using these words,
Yep.
like that's how you get there a lot faster, right? And that's the disconnect I saw. Like when I came over to SaaS on this side of the wall, it's like, oh, okay, your manufacturing page is just another SaaS page with the word manufacturing on it, right? That's why we're not getting through. Like you couldn't possibly know that every leader I talk to in this space, they hate the phrase customer success. They think it's a buzzword. And there's so many ways that they do that where it's like, oh, this is what this word means, like for real, but I've experienced it in this way, so I don't
Hmm.
trust it. Like that's where discovery, like most people hear that
Yeah.
now, and it's like, first of all, we interact on social all the time. So what are you needing to discover? Like just go look at that part. I'm not signing up for a discovery call, right?
I
But
mean,
if you can
that's always.
consult me,
I don't think
right?
you can programatize that out. Like whether you, because words and terms and whatnot changes. Like what is, what if the people that are 10 years younger than us like don't like Ohio because of Skibby Ohio, like that, you almost have less control over that than is needed. But think about any good sales process you've been through. what were some emotions, or what did some of that look like? Like for me, and you can, uh, I don't mean to like lead you anywhere weird or whatnot, but for me, like the best sales processes feel immediately like there's trust, empathy, understanding. Like there's this explanation is like, oh man, they understood our exact problem. So for understanding is like a key element. That has to be like
Yeah.
conversations, context, all of that. Then there is, I mean, you hear like the product sold itself, or like we were bought in immediately, or all of that. It's like understanding, and then the proposition. You almost make the seller or the buyer turn into the seller when it's done really
Hmm.
well. That is how therapy works when it's done well. Mirroring, right? Like if I come in here and tell you you're going to be sad until you cut your beard, that's ridiculous. But it's like if that's what I'm going for, the only way for you to really have buy-in or think that as a ludicrous example is for you to be like, "Ugh, I guess, after talking, like I guess I should shave. If you can get somebody to like solve their problem or see that, hear themselves say it and buy in, it comes from a place of understanding of pain or of whatever it is, of goals. Like there's all the strategy and tactics involved. Um, and it's hard. I mean, like the best sellers in the world to me do that. And a lot of the advice you hear, it's like, here's how to run a killer demo, all the B2B stuff. And what it's getting into is like, be really well prepared, have a lot of context, like have multiple people like multi-threaded into the conversation so you can accrue more buy-in from those people. Um,
Yeah.
highlight,
And this is where like the point of modern marketing and what their role actually is. Like there's no way you can do those things as an individual salesperson. Like when you're like the reason that this situation that Rob is describing, when you when you can be the salesperson that's just helping them buy, like they've already figured it out for themselves,
yep,
right? And the only way you can create that situation is if there's things happening before that that help them figure it out and make it like their idea. So marketing, like the not department, but the activity of marketing, the one to many stuff, that is doing the convincing, that is creating the awareness, right? And in the best cases, sales is a huge part of that. Like they're out there saying the message as well, participating in the company's marketing plan. And then it comes in and it's not like, you gotta, put on your closer hat. It's like, how do we make it as easy as possible? Like, which questions should we be spending our time on to answer in that part of the process because they've already decided, they've already real clear on what's best for them to like 90%, and now you're just helping them make sure that they're making the right decision and that it's very easy for them to move forward, right? And
yes,
like this uncertainty gap, the bigger it is, like the longer it takes you to take them on that journey. And that's where any kind of small, like say quick wins on the sales side, like are related to, okay, how much more awareness can we create? How much like uncertainty can we close? Can we turn into certainty? Oh, we could go all day as usual. But again, I think, and not to kind of uh, torture torture the theme here, uh, all of this gets easier, and even creating this content with Rob, right? This community, like being a part of this, right? Like being with your audience, right? Like talked about this with George and Nico. Like if you think you can just come into a community and sell your awesome thing, all of these things that we're describing will get in your way because you have no idea what the language is, you have no idea like what they care about. So when you can start from this place, you can be on their team right away,
yep,
right? You can be that guy that's just there to help. Hey, let's get this done. Oh, I agree. You're not ready for this right now. Like it's okay. Let's come back in 6 months, right? And here's some content in the meantime. Here's some resources in the meantime. Maybe can help you get ready, right? So uh, obviously there's some passion here. Like participate with the people that you want to help.
I would say, and this is a bombshell for the end, and this is what we can talk about next time. But there is a clear and direct. I agree with all of that. I love community. That's why I'm in here on Fridays with you. I agree with the mission. But I would say that the Hippocratic Oath and like medical, that field, and sales are almost diametrically opposed. I would say so. Like that's the struggle because there's always a tactic seen as like financially incentivized as opposed to just value offering, which is why American healthcare and insurance is so weird and people it pisses people off. But if you're in the community as a trusted person, that value and is supposed to be like one way. So whenever you introduce the element of paying for care and empathy into it, it's hard to balance. Anyway, yeah, let's
Yeah.
talk about that next time. Open source
Yeah.
sharing for best practices like medical documentation.
There you go. That's this has been great, man. I love these deep conversations with you, and hopefully, if you're out there feeling the value, let us know. Uh, we want this to be valuable for the community, and if you have questions about any of this stuff, please feel free to reach out. Um, but when you're thinking about this stuff from a messaging perspective, like how can you, get involved in the community more? Just take a look at what the behavior is out there, find those opportunities, and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.
So yeah,
Thank you, sir.
these are getting better.